Thomas and Jesse met after another run in the park. After a few weeks of training together, their friendship grew closer. Running together was no longer just a physical exercise, it became a time for conversation, for sharing thoughts and experiences. This time after training, when they were about to leave, Jesse suggested that they stay a little longer and take a walk in the park. "Why don't we take another walk? The weather is beautiful, and I feel like I want to be outside a little longer," Jesse said with a smile. Thomas thought for a moment. He was a little surprised, because he was used to the fact that after a run everything always ended quickly, and everyone went about their own business. But this time he didn't want to leave Jesse, and he agreed. "I guess you're right. It's really nice here in the evening. Let's take a walk." They started walking through the park, trying not to rush. The air was cool and fresh, and there weren't many people around. Just a few people with their dogs and other couples who had also decided to enjoy the evening walk. "I've never paid attention to such little things before," Thomas said, looking at the long shadows of the trees that stretched across the ground in the setting sun. "We often don't notice the beauty around us until we stop to look. Sports training helps us stay in the moment, but walks like this remind us of the importance of taking time for ourselves," Jesse replied. Their steps synchronized, and the walk became even more enjoyable. They discussed a variety of things, from simple topics about training to deeper conversations about life, their goals, and dreams. For Thomas, it was something new, the opportunity to share not only thoughts about sports, but also personal experiences. With Jesse, he felt easy and natural, like a good friend with whom he could be open. "You know, I never thought this park would become a place I would go so often. I used to come here just to walk, but now every time we run here, I feel how important this space becomes to me," Jesse said, looking around. "Yes, it's true. There's something special here. If it weren't for our runs, I wouldn't have seen how much there is here," Thomas replied. They walked over to a bench, and Thomas suggested they sit down. The evening sun was almost over the horizon, and everything around was filled with golden light. Jesse happily agreed. They sat quietly for several minutes, listening to the sounds of the park, the rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children playing nearby. "This moment reminds me how important it is to just stop and be here, now, without any worries. How often we run after something and do not notice what is right next to us," said Jesse. "Yes, and this is exactly what I missed. I often forgot about the simple things, about the people around me. But now, when we train together, I begin to understand that the most important thing is real connections, support and time spent together," Thomas replied, looking at her. Thomas and Jesse sat on a park bench, enjoying the peaceful evening. The feeling of harmony between them was so natural that they didn't notice the changing situation around them. Suddenly, a group of boys, about their age, approached the bench, talking loudly among themselves. At first, it seemed normal, but something about their behavior alarmed Thomas. The boys stopped. One of them, with an expression on his face that betrayed a certain anger, looked at Thomas and Jesse, as if looking for a reason to argue. "What are you doing here?" one of the boys asked, his voice too sharp for such a normal situation. Thomas felt his tension rise. He didn't know if he should enter into a conflict, but he understood that he needed to remain calm. Jesse didn't seem scared, although a worried look appeared in her eyes. "We're just resting," Thomas replied, trying to make his voice even and calm, but he noticed how the boys didn't take their eyes off them. "Yes? And why don't we see you here often? New faces?" The boy continued, approaching them as if to test if there was a weak spot between them. His gaze was aggressive, and with it the rest of the boys who had gathered around. Thomas felt his heart beat faster. This was a foreign situation to him, but he could not allow Jesse to become a part of this conflict. He looked at her, feeling how important it was to remain calm. "We just want to spend time together," Thomas tried to answer, feeling the aggression of the boys increasing. Everyone began to laugh quietly, trying to humiliate them. However, Jessie did not seem to intend to back down, even if the situation became tense. She stood up from the bench and looked one of the boys straight in the eye. "We don't want trouble," she said loudly, her words ringing with all the confidence she could muster at that moment. "We're just trying to have a peaceful time." The boys didn't seem to be expecting this reaction, and although they were mocking each other again, they began to tone down their aggression. They stared at each other for a few seconds, then shrugged and finally walked away, leaving Thomas and Jessie alone. Thomas felt a huge sense of relief as soon as they left. He took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves, which were still on edge. "All of this stuff makes you feel like anyone can break you, doesn't it?" Thomas said, now addressing Jessie. She sat down next to him, looking at him with understanding. "You're right, but it's how we react that matters. I'm glad we put that behind us. I know it wasn't easy for you either." "Yeah," Thomas replied, looking out at the horizon. "It's hard, but I guess we have to stay strong, no matter what's going on around us." They sat on the bench for a while longer, in silence, letting the waves of emotion subside. It was another moment where Thomas and Jessie learned to be strong, not only for each other, but also in a world where such hardships constantly occurred. After the incident in the park, when those aggressive boys had approached them, Thomas and Jessie hadn't said much. They had simply left the park quickly, trying to ignore the unwanted attention. Jessie looked a little scared, though she was trying to hold on. Thomas felt a heavy emotion press against his chest, not so much because of the conflict itself, but because of his inability to prevent the situation. If he had been prepared for this, if he had been stronger, maybe they wouldn't have found themselves in this situation. But in that moment, he realized that his job was not just to avoid danger, but also to take care of the people who mattered to him. He couldn't just go home without taking care of Jessie anymore. "I'm sorry this happened," he said as they stepped out onto the lighted street. Jessie nodded, but remained silent, and Thomas noticed that her gaze had turned thoughtful. He wanted a change of atmosphere, wanted her to feel at ease again. And so he decided to start telling her stories that would make her laugh and make her feel better. "You know, when I was little, I was always very inattentive. My mother always asked me questions, and I always answered something wrong," he began, smiling, looking at Jessie. She involuntarily laughed, and Thomas felt that he was on the right track. "Once my mother and I were going to the country. And at some point I was so carried away that I forgot to put my favorite ball somewhere. I didn't even notice how it was left in the car, and I started looking for it all over the country. Only half an hour later I realized that the ball had just been lying in the car all this time. How funny it was, we both ran all over the country looking for it," Thomas said, and Jessie could no longer hold back her laughter. "Now I understand why my mother always laughed at how I could miss something like that," he added with a smile. "I always forget my keys." "That's my constant problem," Jessie replied, and Thomas started laughing again. His heart felt light, and it helped him take his mind off the stress he had been feeling earlier. When they got to Jessie's house, she thanked him for accompanying her, and he realized that she had truly felt better. They started talking about everything from the usual training to their plans for the future. Thomas felt that Jessie was becoming more than just a training partner to him. On the way home his heart was beating faster than usual, and 1,000 thoughts were running through his head. Thomas wondered how it all started. He remembered how a few weeks ago they had just met by chance in the park, when Jessie had run past him, and he had felt that she was different from the others. "She's so stubborn, so strong, but at the same time so open," he thought. As if she wanted to communicate, but she didn't try to pull, it was all natural. He liked how Jessie didn't hide behind a mask and didn't try to impress. She was just herself. And even after that incident with the boys in the park, when the atmosphere suddenly became tense, Jessie remained calm, although it was clear that she was nervous too. She didn't rush to run away or panic, but even in her eyes Thomas noticed a slight anxiety. She doesn't let herself be broken. She's really strong, Thomas thought. Thomas noticed how often he had started to notice her in his thoughts lately. She was no longer just a girl he trained with, she had become something important in his life, even if he couldn't quite put his finger on why. "What's wrong with me?" he asked himself. He didn't want to admit it, but he already felt comfortable around her. They didn't just run together, they could talk about everything, training, life, even things he'd never been able to discuss with other people. "It's like she reads me," Thomas kept thinking, "like she knows what I need at this moment." He felt like Jessie wasn't just a training buddy. Her words helped him let go of his pain and sadness. She allowed him to be himself, not judging, but simply supporting. And at the same time, he saw how much she made decisions on her own, how she didn't have to constantly rely on others for help. She was strong, yet not shy about showing weakness when necessary. Thomas felt his gaze drift to Jessie. Her hair fluttered in the wind, her arms moving freely as they walked side by side. She looked so beautiful, why didn't I notice this before? The feeling of a slight pull came over him again. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't help but think of her. He had his doubts. He wasn't sure if he should pursue these feelings. Maybe this is just temporary? Is it just an attachment from training together? At the same time, he was aware that something had changed inside him when she was around. He wanted to see where it would lead. He wanted to know if they could become closer, not just through running, but in everything else. Maybe I'm just afraid to open up. But then again, what do I have to lose? You're just not used to this kind of relationship, Thomas thought, trying to calm himself. He knew he was really afraid to open up more, because it would mean being vulnerable. But why is it so easy with her? He couldn't explain it to himself, but with Jessie he felt free. There was no pressure, no need to show off any other qualities. She didn't judge him, and he felt like they had been friends since childhood. Maybe I've finally met someone who understands what it's like to be myself. But the thoughts in his head wouldn't stop. Will I be able to trust my feelings? What if she doesn't feel the same way I do?